1 Kings chapter 21, there's a story that I like to use in different settings of Naboth. King Ahab comes up to Naboth and says, your land is really good land, and I want to have a garden next to it, and it's next to my palace. Sell me your land. And Naboth says, I can't sell you my land. Well, I'll give you a better land. Anywhere you want. I'll give you more. I'll give you more than what you have now. And Naboth says, I cannot sell my ancestral land. Remember, I think you might know, Vinny, that in the biblical text, the land was actually not owned by them. It was owned by God. Yep. And they couldn't sell it, not in perpetuity. It wasn't their land to sell. It's ancestral land that they can't do this. So the question for the Palestinians became this, why should the British be the ones to decide who gets to divide up the land? And why should the British be able to give that land to somebody else? Now, of course, had the Palestinians known that was going to be the best offer they were ever going to get, sure, hindsight's 2020. The reality is that 1948 UN resolution gave 78% of the land to the state of Israel. So Rashid Khalidi, I mentioned before, he's an Oxford graduate. He's a professor at Columbia. His family were leaders in Jerusalem and in that whole area going back to the 1900s. So when the first Zionists started coming over, Khalidi's family members, his great-great-grand, were talking with the Zionists like, hey, guys, if you do this, it's not going to work out very well. They're not going to let you just have the land. You're going to have to figure out something else. And it became apparent after a little while that they're going to have to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians to get out of here because they're not just going to give up their land. So Rashid Khalidi himself has actually been on the negotiating team for several of the peace negotiations there. And he said there's not been one offer ever since 1948 to the Palestinians that has ever began to meet any of the Palestinian conditions. In other words, sure, they've offered treaties, they've offered peace before, but they've always offered peace. Basically, it's almost always Israel and the United States setting the conditions. And the Palestinians are they never get what they ask for. So one of the conditions the Palestinians have been requesting from the beginning is to recognize the 750,000 refugees. Well, guess what? The Israeli Knesset passed a law making it illegal to recognize the refugees from 1948. If they cannot give you a peace deal that will recognize the refugees, it's against their law to do so. Yeah. All right. Secondly, they want to have Jerusalem as a shared capital. Okay, you guys can have Jerusalem. We'll have Jerusalem. Remember, most Palestinians today are Muslims, and it's the third holiest site in Islam is Jerusalem. All right. They also want to have sovereignty, freedom of movement, freedom of self-rule. All right. So